In part 1 of my review, I said that the show tends to be over the top at times, but when compared to a lot of modern anime, I realize it really isn't. I mean, people can't spontaneously fly, shoot plasma balls out of their hands, or whiplash themselves across a cityscape to take down giant monsters. Nope. Dirty Pair is very grounded and down to earth. But sometimes the show does have those moments when you have to say to yourself, how the heck did they survive that? Once again, it's a lot like Indiana Jones. This film franchise generally has a very realistic tone, but then occasionally our main characters survive the impossible. Dirty Pair was the same. Because of its rational nature, when something over the top happens, it really feels extreme. That is what I think worked so well in the series. There's some anime out there that tend to always constantly be over the top in an effort to keep things interesting, but they're not. When I watch those types of anime, I kind of grow tired and become numb to it all. Amazing scenes don't amaze me anymore because it's too routine to the point where it just becomes the norm. There needs to be some kind of self-control, which is a philosophy that Dirty Pair exercises, and it does indeed help to create a nice variety. But for some strange reason, a lot of people that are familiar with this franchise will tell you that it is shallow and brainless. Respectfully, I disagree. Not only does the show have subtexts in its stories, but also it is very good at hiding them through a little-known technique that I like to call subtlety. Again, I find that quite a few anime out there tend to be lacking in meaningful subtlety. Sure, a lot of them have mellow scenes, but I'm not talking about that. I mean more on the lines of, instead of presenting something that has subtle religious symbolism, they blatantly wave it right in front of your face. Or instead of someone secretly trying to understand what it means to have a mind and consciousness, they'll philosophize for hours on the issue to the point where you just want them to shut up. Even good anime like Cowboy Bebop suffers in this regard. There was even this one scene where Spike, the main character, goes on about something that has to do with him seeing the present in one eye and the past in the other, which is just a vague and poetic way of saying that his past is haunting him. I'm not saying it's a terrible scene, a bit too pretentious and obvious for my taste, but this is leading up to a massive problem. Obvious symbolism, poetic imagery, and lengthy complex dialogue are usually used to make the audience realize that this is supposed to be deep stuff. But when an anime doesn't take this approach, it will be brushed off as mindless dumb entertainment. So you're saying that Dirty Pair has a complex narrative under the surface, I hear you ask? No. Dirty Pair's narrative is still very simple, but the thing that people need to understand is this. Depth doesn't always reside in complexity. Depth can also be found in simplicity. I can give some other anime examples of this, but instead I want to demonstrate this method of storytelling through a non-anime. Back to the Future is a film that on the surface has a rather simple plot, but it also has some underlying themes. One of those themes is centered on George. Almost his whole life, even into adulthood, he has been pushed around by a lot of people, including the main high school bully, Biff. And most people will assume that Biff is basically the only obstacle that George would ever have to face. Simple, right? Well, after many years of watching this movie, I finally realized that ultimately the main struggles that George goes through are not really external, but instead internal. You see, George has always been afraid to take chances and fight for things that are important to him, but instead his constant fear of rejection and being hurt holds him back. This is the real obstacle that he faces. The moment George overcame this limitation wasn't when he knocked out Biff with a single blow to the face because of Biff molesting Lorraine. No, it was when he took a stand and told Biff to leave her alone. Once I realized this aspect of this character, it gave him more depth, and most people generally don't notice the subtle subtext. And the best part is, it's not unrealistically overly complex or philosophical, but a much simpler and yet still interesting and more believable portrayal of human behavior. Dirty Pair wasn't just inspired by Western films in terms of culture and references, but also in the way stories are told and characters explored. It's a very unique series. I have never seen other anime approach these aspects this way before. So what are some examples of this in the show itself? Well, in the case of episode 8, the hidden message was that, although on the surface Kay doesn't want things to change, in reality, however, she actually wants what is best for Yuri, even if it means the end of their partnership. This fact was not obvious the first time I watched this episode. Likewise, in the case of episode 26, the hidden message, I believe, was not that of defeating the bad guy. Remember, Marcus has lost, the 3WA has defeated him. This is about two ill-equipped girls needlessly risking their lives to stop a madman that doesn't need stopping in the first place, all in an effort to rescue not anyone special like a family member or boyfriend or a very important political figure or anything glamorous like that, just their boring, grumpy, middle-aged boss. This tells us so much about these two. The amount of loyalty they demonstrate clues us into what kind of people they are, and the value they have for life in general. But I would like to once again emphasize that not all episodes are like this. Only a few of them offer something a little more than just a simple plot. But once again, it is those few episodes that made the whole experience worthwhile. I was stoked when I found out that not only there are 3 movies based on the Dirty Pair TV series, but also an OVA series. For those that are unaware, OVA, which stands for Original Video Animation, is basically the Japanese term for straight-to-video, or in this case, straight-to-VHS. 2 of the 3 movies were also in OVA form, with only one actually getting a theatrical release. Eventually, I managed to get my hands on the OVA series and the 3 movies, and after watching them, I have to say, they were actually disappointing. Almost everything that I loved about the TV show was nowhere to be found here. The second movie, Dirty Pair Project Eden, I found to be particularly annoying because, well, just look at what they're wearing. I thought the whole point of their outfits was to be a parody of female wrestlers from the 1980s, but now our so-called crime fighters are sporting bikinis. Oh, and this would carry on through the rest of the series. Great. But also, there was no meat to the stories and characters. It was all underdeveloped, and this goes for the OVA series as well. It was somewhat insultingly simple. Yes, I know I used that word before, but this is a different kind of simple. The plots of the TV series were simple, but there were also subtexts and themes present there. I couldn't find any of that in the 3 movies and OVA series. What happened here? Why the drastic change? Well, I did some research and I found out that some key writers that worked on the TV show moved on to other ventures and would not be involved in anything Dirty Pair related ever again. But the question is this: are those same writers responsible for my favorite episodes? Well, it turns out to be a resounding yes. These 3 writers, which include Michiru Shimada, who would go on to work on renowned anime like One Piece, Toshimichi Okawa, who would eventually work on the Lupin the Third franchise, and Kusunori Ito, who by the way previously worked on Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, would be responsible for the acclaimed 1995 motion picture Ghost in the Shell. Ito and Shimada are quite versatile in doing anything from fun and crazy to mellow and mysterious, and Okawa seems to put an emphasis on character development. I was suspicious that it was he all along that was responsible for episodes 8 and 26. I was right. I'm not joking when I say I didn't know this when I reviewed those episodes. Okay, so basically they had different people working on the movies and OVA series, which explains the dumbing down scene in them. But here's something that really bothers me. A lot of people in the West that are familiar with the show considers the second movie, Dirty Pair Project Eden, and the OVA series to be just as good, if not better, than the TV series. Why? I did some more research and came across some interesting info. When ADV Films tried to localize the shows and movies for Western release, they were only able to get the rights of dubbing and distribution for the OVA series and 3 movies. Yeah, the TV series was the only one that did not get a Western release. It all makes sense now. All that nonsense about how Dirty Pair is brainless and shallow turns out to be true for Western audiences because they only got the brainless and shallow installments of the franchise. Sure, today we are able to get our hands on the TV series thanks to modern distribution, but it is too late. The franchise as a whole is mostly compared and associated with these movies and the OVA series. So even if the same group of people saw the TV series down the road, they're not going to notice anything different, because they're not looking for any deeper character traits or themes, because the movies and OVA series have unintentionally trained them to not expect it. Now, I'm not saying that these people do not get it, and I'm just way smarter than them. No, the only reason why I noticed this difference is simply because I was exposed to the TV series first. Because of this, my benchmark and expectations are different. I mean, Am I alone on this one? Well, it turns out the general Japanese public agree with me on this one. The TV series was actually the most successful thing that came out of the franchise. All the other installments were failures. Bear with me here. Although only 24 episodes aired on TV simply because it didn't get high enough ratings, yeah, I wonder where I've heard that before. The show was still popular enough to the point that not only it won the Anime Age Grand Prix for Best Anime of 1985, but it would also allow for the show to complete episodes 25 and 26, produce a movie that would get a theatrical release, and get a second season in the form of an OVA series. That also reminds me a lot of something else. Unfortunately, the movie, Project Eden, wouldn't earn enough money to warrant a sequel. The OVA series would be cancelled only after 10 episodes, which, by the way, didn't have to compete with television ratings, it only needed to sell well, which it didn't. And the straight-to-VHS movie that was made as a last-ditch effort to save the franchise, well, let's just say that no more Dirty Pair came after that, if that is any indication as to how well it did. Even though we got a reboot years later, let's be honest here, that is related to Dirty Pair in name only. So in conclusion, the 3 movies and OVA series are not terrible. They are exactly what everyone has been telling us. They are exciting, funny, and dumb roller coaster rides. And there's nothing wrong with that. But Dirty Pair, the TV series, surprised me. It did more than that. It showed me that anime is capable of providing an experience that I thought was only possible in stuff like Indiana Jones and Star Wars. Entertainment that proves that you can still have a simple adventure that anyone can understand, but also in addition to that have a lot of meaningful substance and heart. Others may not see what I see in the show. And that's what art is. It's very subjective. This video isn't about me declaring that this is the best anime of all time, but in all honesty, it is to me.